Welcome, Steeler Nation. I'm Stan Savran. It's my great pleasure to bring in a member of the Steelers Hall of Honor, Carnell Lake. We'd probably run out of time if I listed all of this gentleman's accomplishment, Hall of Honors, Pro Bowl, Steeler starter, Steeler assistant coach. Carnell, great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. A second-round draft pick, 1989, but you're a linebacker at UCLA, and you go to the East-West Shrine Game, and is that where the pros decided you'd be better as a safety?
I think they were still deciding. In that game, the East-West Shrine Game, I played the first half at outside linebacker and the second half at safety. So they wanted to see me play both just in case. I had a feeling, though, I was probably going to wind up being a safety because I was just too small for the pros as a linebacker. And that turned out to be the case.
Was it a difficult transition?
You know, it was. And what helped me get through the East-West Shrine Game, the practices that week, I watched Steve Atwater. And we were paired up. I was a strong safety. Steve Atwater, obviously a Hall of Fame safety now, was the free safety. And I watched him practice. And I kept asking him questions, and Steve was great, and he answered a lot of my questions, and we were friends, and you know, I just tried to emulate some of his play, even when we entered the pros.
A good guy to follow, a Hall of
Absolutely.
Famer, a great player for the Denver Broncos. By the way, in case you're getting ready for any draft-related issues, when the Steelers took Carnell in the second round, Mel Kiper said it was a reach. Do you remember him saying that?
I heard that, and I understood what he was saying. You know, no one knows what I can do at safety because I had never played defensive back before. And to go up into the second round to get a linebacker to hopefully be able to make the transition to safety is kind of a reach. So I understood that.
Okay, well, all right, Mel, you're forgiven, at least from Carnell's perspective. It's interesting, you join a secondary that already had Rod Woodson in it, Thomas Everett.
Yes.
It was a pretty talented group. And I'm wondering, and the fact that John Fox, who of course later went on to coach the Broncos and the Bears, he was your secondary coach. How instrumental was he, in addition to instruction from guys like Rod Woodson, to develop you from a linebacker into a defensive back?
Well,
and Rod had played safety almost his entire life before, because he could run, they moved him to the corner.
Absolutely. Rod was such an athlete. I think he could have played just about any position on the field. But, you know, coming into the league, I had no experience, so I looked around for guys to grab whatever techniques, tips, tricks that I could. And I was very fortunate because we had a bunch of young guys, very talented individuals, great students of the game, hard workers, and attention to detail. And that was Rod Woodson. That was guys like Thomas Everett, our free safety, veterans on the team like Larry Griffin, Dwayne Woodruff. And so I looked to them to grasp as much as I could every day in practice. Oh, that's how you do this. That's how you do that. And John's role was to try to tame some very young guys, alpha male types who were all over the place. And that room was wild. Not wild as we were crazy and disrespectful, but just we had our opinions and we were set, and he had to pull the reins in sometimes because we wanted to just go. And obviously for a coach, that's what you want. You want self-motivators, something that Chuck Noll always talked about. You know, one of his sayings was, if I have to motivate you, I'm going to fire you. And so we were self-motivated, and John Fox was also a young coach at the time, and so we kind of gelled and took off, and eventually in the next year or two we became number one in pass defense.
It's interesting you mentioned Chuck Noll. Obviously you played for both he and Bill Cowher, and the obvious difference in their personality and coaching styles are plain for everyone. But I'm wondering, when Bill came in '92, did that represent a significant change in the way that he wanted you to play defense?
You know, actually, no. Chuck Noll was obviously a great teacher, and taught me personally a lot of things about technique that I used my whole career. At the time when I entered the league, Chuck Noll had a defensive coordinator by the name of Rod Rust. And Rod Rust ran a zone match concept that was eventually was very similar, kind of like a precursor in some ways to Bill Cowher's and Dom Capers, Coach LeBeau's blitz, zone blitz defense. And so we were, as young guys transitioning to the Bill Cowher era, we were kind of familiar with some of the concepts of that defense. And so in the secondary, that helped us a lot. Now, when Bill came over, he inherited a really very young, talented group. Rod Woodson, Hardy Nickerson became a perennial Pro Bowler, Greg Lloyd, just lots of talent, especially on the defensive side. And so I think Bill was very smart in saying, hey, I'm not going to rock the boat here. Let's implement our style of defense. Let's add some more blitzes to it, which became Blitzburgh. And I'm going to let my experienced assistant coaches on the defensive side, Dom Capers, who went on to be a head coach, Dick LeBeau, who's probably should be in the Hall of Fame. He could be in the Hall of Fame as an assistant coach as well. I'm going to let them take over the defense, and then I'm going to focus on trying to get these young players to focus in. And so when you see some of the players on the sidelines, some of the NFL films where Coach Cowher is talking to us individually, hey, blitz the quarterback, whether it's Greg Lloyd, or in my case, when I made a transition to cornerback, he gave me words of encouragement on the sidelines that got me through some tough games.
I want to get to that, and we certainly will. But I'm wondering, when you're playing that kind of aggressive defense, as a defensive player, does that suit your personality? Let's get after him.
As a secondary player, the more pressure, the better. In some instances, because the ball has to come out quick, you don't have to cover as long. So we were great with that. But the difference is, we weren't just isolated to covering while, the Greg Lloyds and the Kevin Greens and the Chad Browns and Levon Kirkland's got all the attention by just sacking the quarterback every other play. He actually let Rod and I and other DBs get in on the blitz, and that was awesome. Because that fitted what I did in college. I was a blitzing linebacker. So I said, well, this is great. I get to do what I did in college, but I also get to cover too.
It's often been said, Carnell, in really any sport, that you have to learn how to win, and that sometimes that takes losing. 92, Bill Cowher's first year, you're the top seed in the AFC, and yet Buffalo comes to town and dominates you. And I'm wondering what the feeling was at that point. Was it stunning to you that happened?
No, it wasn't. Actually, it was just the opposite. I think a very young team, especially for a lot of the guys that were transitioning from Chuck Noll era to the Bill Cowher era, we were hungry for any kind of representation in the playoffs. And so just the fact that we got into the playoffs and we were able to compete with a very talented Buffalo team, we were motivated for the next year. And then we just kept building year after year on those experiences. And then we finally broke through in '94, I believe, where we were now the team to be reckoned with in the AFC.
Well, I was going to mention '89. You had some playoff experience when you won that amazing game in Houston.
Yes.
Of course, then the next couple of years didn't work out quite as well. Let's go to '94. When you think about Steeler playoff games and the history of playoff games, certainly in Pittsburgh, that loss to San Diego had to be stunning and shocking. The whole world expected you to win, and you had a 13-3 lead.
It was very shocking, and it showed a little bit of our experience still. In very tight games, it's a requirement for teams to be very disciplined, because one or two plays makes the game. And in the end of the game, it came down to one or two plays. And we learned from that, and fortunately, we were able to keep the team together at least one more year to get past that hurdle and to get into the Super Bowl.
the name Alfred Papunu should never be uttered by any true Steeler fan. I can still see him running for a touchdown. All right, so 95, that's 94, a motivating factor, losing to the Chargers. But the season starts off in a horrible manner when Rod Woodson is injured in the first game against Detroit. And that leads to the saga of Carnell Lake switching positions. What transpired after Rod got hurt? Was that done immediately, moving you from safety to corner, or did that take a few games?
So Rod was injured the very first game, as you say, against Detroit, and that was a big blow because Rod was, not only was he one of the stars on our team, but Rod was a star in the league at that point. And his impact on the game and impact on the Steelers games for us was crucial. And so when he went down, we had a big void to fill. And we didn't quite know how to fill that void for a number of games. We went 3-4 with Rod out. We had some transitioning going on in the secondary, who can adjust and take over the position for Rod when he was out. So we had a rotation of corners, and we had a compounding problem again because we had other injuries as well. And from my understanding, the defensive staff got together along with Bill Cowher, and they said, well, let's try Carnell out there. And they called me on a Friday, I believe, or a Monday. I can't remember exactly. It was either Friday before the next week when I made a transition, or a Monday, and they asked me, would you be willing to do it? And I said, I was a little bit hesitant. I said, well, let's see how the week goes, a week of practice. And if you guys like what you see, let's go with it. And it turned out that we went with it. And along with other players like Willie Williams, who had a huge year that year, and he was very new at the cornerback position. Nobody knew what he could do. We had Chad Brown coming into his own, Levon Kirkland. We had a lot of young players emerging right at the time we needed them to. And together, we went on 8 straight win streak that year and got into the playoffs.
Was the transition, and folks probably know, that Carnell not only made the transition, he made the Pro Bowl that year as a cornerback, which is utterly amazing. Was the transition easier from safety to corner than it was from coming out of college from linebacker to safety? At least you were in the defensive backfield this time.
Yeah. I want to just make one quick note, a little side note. I did make the Pro Bowl, but I made the Pro Bowl at safety. Even though I played most of the year at corner, they voted me in as a safety. And so to me, I didn't care because I was going to the Pro Bowl. But I appreciated the voting because they recognized, hey, this guy's making a switch. And, what strong safety is going to switch after 6 years to move to corner? And so that was an amazing event in itself. But I think to answer your second question, because I had switched positions from linebacker to safety, in my mind I was thinking, well, it can't be much harder than that because the switch from linebacker to safety, I knew I had no experience. But switching from safety to corner, obviously I had 6 years of defensive back experience, and so that's what made the transition easier, and that's what made my decision to go ahead and allow the position switch in the first place just so much easier.
Did the coaching staff, spend extra time with you teaching different techniques, not only different play calls, responsibilities, but also techniques?
Yes. Dick LeBeau, who was my position coach, we didn't talk so much about technique as we did about mindset. And for me, that was one area that really, I thought, took me to a next level in my play. I think Coach LeBeau was able to draw from his personal experience as a corner and give me what the mindset needs to be successful at that position, because it's feast or famine out there. Everybody in the stadium is watching when the ball goes in the air, and who's covering those receivers? It's the DB. And so everybody's waiting with their breath held to see what's going to happen at the end of that play. And so you're going to get beat quite often. You hope you're not, but if you get beat quite often, you're probably not going to be a corner for long. But if you start to make some plays and you make majority of your plays, you're probably going to wind up playing in the league a long time.
I wish you did. Let's move on. 95, we mentioned 94, that loss. Mm-hmm. Now the 95 AFC Championship game, once again at Three Rivers, this time against the Indianapolis Colts. And you've got a lead, 20-16, and the famous Hail Mary, which a prayer that was almost answered. Where were you on that play? Describe your reactions, and were you aware, did you actually see that the ball to Aaron Bailey actually fell incomplete?
That's a very great question. The way the play unfolded, I was coming from one of the outside positions on the field, converging on the ball, and I didn't time it well. So I wound up in front of the whole pile of players, and I was trying to jump high enough where I could get it before the pile behind me could, but I couldn't jump that high. I couldn't jump high enough. I mistimed it. The ball went over my head, and I said a couple of key choice words like, man, I missed that ball. And I turned around, and when I turned around, I saw a big scramble in the pile. And I thought that the Colts player came down with the ball because he was turned a little bit away from me, and it looked like he had the ball. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then I looked over at the ref, and the ref was doing this, and I knew. I said, we're going to the Super Bowl. It was a great moment.
Did you see the ball on the ground? Were you convinced, or did you have to be convinced by the referee's signal?
When I saw the ref, I just started running. I didn't care at that point. I just knew that if the ref was calling no catch, then that's all I needed, because that's all that counted.
And you ran all the way to Phoenix for the Super Bowl.
Yes,
Didn't end up like everybody wanted. Lastly, Carnell, you later on became a Steeler assistant coach. And I wondered, did you enjoy the coaching aspect?
It was great. I had a great experience. One, I reunited with Coach LeBeau. Coach LeBeau called me after their 2010 season. They had some coaching opportunities available, and Coach LeBeau was like, do you want to coach? And it just happened to be after Dom Capers had called me about a coaching position in Green Bay. And I decided that the Steelers coaching position was a better fit for me, and joined the Steelers as a coach in 2011. And I was very blessed. I had a great room of veterans, and I talked to Coach LeBeau, and he gave me my marching orders and told me, how he thought that this could play out. And I was, because of Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark, Ike Taylor, Willie Gay, and a bunch of other guys we had in that room, we were able to not only be a good secondary, but a good defensive unit. We went number one in defense, number one in pass defense, and went on to the playoffs. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out like we wanted to, but I knew I had a great room of defensive backs.
Carnell, congratulations. You are a most honored member of the Hall of Honor.
It's truly a blessing, and it's a privilege to be among such Steeler legends.